Marcus Hayes woke up before dawn with a mix of excitement and nerves fluttering in his chest. He had planned this day for months, saving every extra dollar from his night shifts at the hospital and from the weekend gig delivering newspapers. As a single dad, he knew how tight money could be. Bills came first, then food and rent. But he also wanted to give his daughter something special, to show her how much he loved her, and to make a memory they would both treasure forever. Naomi turned 10 last month, and he promised her a surprise trip to see her grandmother. At first she thought it was just a story, something to look forward to someday. But now, as they pulled out of their small driveway before sunrise, Marcus could hardly hold back his grin. Naomi sat in the back seat, clutching her pink backpack, her dark hair falling over her shoulders. She rubbed her eyes as the streetlights passed. "Is it morning already, Dad?" she whispered without turning around. He glanced in the rearview mirror and nodded. "It is. We have to catch an early flight if we want to make it on time." She blinked at him, then a slow smile spread across her face as she realized, "We're going to Grandma's?" she asked, her voice rising with joy. Marcus smiled wider. "Yes, sweetheart. But there's more." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 2 boarding passes. First class. Her eyes grew huge, and she let out a little gasp of delight. She bounced in her seat, nearly knocking over the water bottle and the cup holder. "First class? Really? Like in the movies?" she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Marcus laughed softly. "Yes, just like in the movies." They drove in comfortable silence after that, each lost in dreams of what first class would feel like. Marcus thought of the wide seats, extra legroom, maybe even a hot meal. With real dishes, Naomi pictured fluffy pillows, big windows, and maybe even a flight attendant offering snacks from a silver tray. When they reached the airport, the sky was just starting to turn pink. Marcus parked in the long-term lot, careful to choose a space close to the shuttle. He fumbled with his wallet to make sure he had his driver's license, credit card, and the boarding passes. He checked Naomi's bag, too, making sure she had her favorite book, a small stuffed rabbit, and some snacks for the plane. She hopped out of the car and ran toward the shuttle, turning back to wave at him. He waved back, his heart full. Inside the terminal, sounds of rolling suitcases and overhead announcements filled the air. The fluorescent lights made everything look bright and new. Marcus and Naomi stood in the short line for first class. Check-in. A few other passengers chatted quietly or tapped at their phones. Marcus handed his boarding passes to the agent, a young woman with a neat bun and a friendly smile. She scanned them quickly. "Mr. Hayes," she said, tapping the screen. "Can I see your ID, please?" Marcus nodded and handed over his driver's license. The agent looked at his name and his photo, then back at the boarding pass. The smile faded just a little. "Thank you. Enjoy your flight." She handed back the ID along with the passes. Marcus breathed a quiet sigh of relief. He gathered their papers and said, "Thank you." Naomi skipped beside him as they walked toward security, chatting about how she might get juice or a sandwich. In the lounge, Marcus felt a bubble of pride in his chest. He looked down at her, with her bright eyes full of wonder, and thought how lucky he was to be her dad. He remembered the first night he held her in his arms, so small and warm. Now she was almost as tall as his shoulders. Time flew by. He pushed the memory back gently and focused on the moment. At the security checkpoint, a uniformed officer checked his boarding pass and ID again. Marcus handed them over without a word. The officer glanced quickly at the license, then looked. "At Marcus, sir? Can I see your boarding pass again?"
When Marcus showed it, the officer frowned.
"I'm sorry, sir, but I need to verify your ID one more time." Marcus felt a small knot tighten in his stomach. He handed his license again. As the officer scanned the pass, then the license, then the pass once more. Naomi, walking a few steps, a head turned around. "Daddy, why are they looking at your card so much?" she whispered, her voice wavering. Marcus put an arm around her shoulder. "It's okay, honey," he said softly. "They are just doing their job." Behind them, other passengers moved through the line without delay. A white woman in a business suit flashed her ID once and moved on. Another family with small children passed through without any extra questions.
Marcus saw them and felt this thing of unfairness. They left.
The officer handed back his license and boarding pass at last. "Go ahead, sir." He stepped aside, and Marcus collected his belongings, pulling gently on Naomi's hand. She squeezed his finger tightly, and he squeezed back. He did his best to smile at her, to keep the moment light. "Ready for the lounge?" he asked. She nodded, and they slipped past the metal detector into the next area. They reached the first-class lounge doors, where a hostess welcomed them with a warm good morning and scanned their passes without asking for more. ID Marcus held his breath as the doors closed behind them. Naomi's eyes lit up at the plush chairs, the quiet music. The gentle murmur of other early travelers reading newspapers or enjoying coffee sank into one of the soft armchairs and pointed to a selection of fresh fruit and pastries. "Go. Pick something for you," he said. She ran over to the buffet, her small feet patting softly on the carpet. He watched her, his chest warming with happiness. He felt as if all the hard work, all the long hours had paid off at this moment. After a minute of glorious calm, Marcus noticed it was almost time to board. He gathered their things, and they walked toward the gate. The plane waited just beyond the jet bridge. Marcus looked down the corridor, imagining the spacious cabin, the big seats, the crisp white napkins. Naomi skipped beside him, her excitement. Returning, they reached the entry to the plane, and Marcus handed his boarding pass to the flight attendant. She smiled and scanned it. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Hayes." He smiled back. Just then, as they took their first steps into the cabin, she paused. "Sir, I'm sorry, but may I see your ID again?" Marcus blinked in surprise. He reached into his pocket and handed over the license. The attendant studied it closely, then glanced at him and back at the license. She frowned slightly and said, "Thank you, sir. Enjoy your flight." She handed back the ID and moved on to the next passenger. Marcus felt a cold drop of confusion and discomfort settle in his stomach. He glanced at Naomi, who stood a few steps behind him, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She looked at him with wide, happy eyes. He forced a small smile. "Let's find our seat, sweetie," he said. But as he turned to step forward, another flight attendant approached from the aisle. "Excuse me, sir, but could I see your ID one more time?" Marcus's heart sank. He held out his license, feeling all the pride of the morning slipping away. Naomi watched, confused. Marcus took a steadying breath, held her hand gently, and passed over his ID again. He wondered how many times they would ask. He wondered if he was doing something wrong. The cabin around him still gleamed with comfort and promise. But for Marcus, the joy of the surprise had begun to tarnish under the weight of endless ID checks. The moment he had built so carefully now felt heavy with explanation he did not want to give. He swallowed hard and waited, feeling every eye in first class on him once more. Marcus guided Naomi by the hand as they stepped forward in the check-in line. The morning light filtered through the terminal windows, casting soft patterns on the polished floor. The hum of voices and the rolling of suitcases filled the air, like a gentle tide. Marcus felt a mix of excitement and nerves in his chest. He reminded himself that this trip was a gift for his daughter, a chance to make her smile and to give her a memory she would carry for years. He exchanged a quick look with Naomi, whose eyes shone with wonder at the bustle around them. When it was their turn, Marcus placed their boarding passes on the counter in front of the agent. She was a woman with kind eyes but a strict professional manner. She scanned Naomi's pass first, then turned her screen toward Marcus. "Mr. Hayes, can I please see your photo ID?" she asked in a polite tone. Marcus nodded and reached into his wallet. He handed over his driver's license without a second thought. The agent looked down at his license, then back at the boarding pass. He watched as her eyes flicked from name to photo, back to the name on her screen. She tapped a few keys, held the license up to the light, and finally handed it back. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," she said. "Here are your passes. Have a great flight." She gave a gentle smile. Marcus felt relief flood through him. He collected the passes and tucked them safely in his jacket pocket. Naomi skipped ahead, her small feet patting happily on the tile. He followed, proud and still eager for the adventure ahead. They moved toward security. but Marcus could feel the day's first crack of tension. He thought of the hundreds of times he had shown that same license at stores, or when he filled up. His car, he had never minded because it was part of life. But today, in the bright glow of the terminal, it felt heavier, more charged. He tightened his grip on Naomi's hand without meaning to. At the security line, Marcus placed their carry-on bag and personal items into the bins. He slipped his wedding ring into his pocket, carried over from a marriage that had ended softly. Years ago, it reminded him of old love, then of new love, his love for Naomi. She gave him a small, encouraging smile, and he squeezed her hand back. They moved forward through the metal detector. Naomi bounced through easily. Marcus felt a brief flutter of pride as she laughed at the gentle beep of the machine. On the other side, a uniformed security officer stood waiting. His gaze swept the line of passengers calmly until it settled on Marcus. He held up a hand. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass and ID one more time?" he said without ceremony. Marcus froze for a moment, surprised by the repetition. He handed the documents over. The officer examined them with a frown, scanning the boarding pass, inspecting the license, then scanning the pass again. Naomi stood, close by, clutching her small backpack, her head tilted in confusion. "Daddy, why are they doing that?" she whispered, her voice soft and worried. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his throat. He knelt to her level and forced a calm tone. "They just need to check everything twice," he said gently. "It is okay. They're doing their job to keep us safe." He tapped her shoulder lightly, trying to share a sense of calm that he did not fully feel himself. The officer handed back the documents finally. "You may go through," he said. Marcus picked up their trays and belongings. He draped Naomi's coat over his arm and lifted her backpack. He looked around and noticed other travelers moving freely, passing through without further questions. A tall man in a business suit had not been asked again. A young couple with a toddler had walked right through after a single check. Marcus swallowed hard. He felt the eyes of other passengers on him now, subtle glances as he gathered their things. Naomi stepped close, her small body leaning into his side for reassurance. They walked quickly toward the lounge entrance. The calm music and soft lighting inside felt like stepping into a gentle bubble, far away from the cold brightness of security. A hostess greeted them and scanned their passes without delay. Naomi's face lit up. "We made it," she whispered. To Marcus, hardly containing her excitement, he managed a smile, though it felt a little forced. He held her hand as they passed through the doors, leaving the harsh overhead lights behind. In the lounge, Marcus settled into a plush armchair. He watched as Naomi rushed to choose a snack, fresh fruit, warm pastries, little sandwiches neatly wrapped. Her delight warmed his heart. He closed his eyes for a moment and thought about the sacrifices he made so she could hold that soft chair and nibble on a croissant. Every extra shift at the hospital and every careful budget decision had led to this morning. He felt both proud and a little weary. Being a single dad often meant carrying the weight of both parents in his heart and in his wallet. After a few minutes of calm, they walked to the gate. A line of first-class passengers formed under a sign that read, "Now boarding." Marcus took Naomi's hand and joined the group. The jet bridge felt narrow and a little intimidating, but Naomi's grip reminded him of his purpose. When they reached the plane door, he handed his boarding pass to a friendly flight attendant. She smiled and scanned the code. "Welcome aboard," she said cheerfully, stepping aside to let them in. They crossed the threshold into the cabin, and Marcus's hopes soared at the sight of the wide leather seats and soft blankets. Naomi's eyes sparkled at the neat rows and the gentle hum of activity. He whispered, "We're here, sweetheart. Just pick a seat." She ran toward a window seat with a view of the tarmac. He followed and slid into the aisle seat next to her. A moment later, a second flight attendant approached. "Mr. Hayes, may I see your ID, please?"
Yes.
he asked, holding out his hand. Marcus blinked. He had shown that card 3 times already today. He reached into his pocket and handed over his license again. The attendant looked at his photo, then at his name on the boarding pass. He tapped the screen on his handheld device twice, then handed back the license. "Thank you, sir." "Enjoy your flight," he said, without returning the smile that had been on his face a moment earlier. Marcus felt a cold flush creep up his neck. Around them, other passengers settled in without interruption. A white couple, a few rows back, chatted and popped open their blankets. A businessman across the aisle was already flipping through a magazine. But everywhere Marcus looked, he saw comfort for others and a kind of distance for him. Naomi sensed the shift. She laid her small hand on his arm. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" she asked, voice low and worried. Marcus looked into her eyes, into the unguarded trust shining there. He swallowed the lump in his throat and stretched his lips into a reassuring smile. "No, my brave girl," he said softly. "We are not in trouble. They are just making sure everything is right." He patted her hand and reached for her backpack, hoping the familiar act would ease her mind. He tried to concentrate on the seatbelt buckle and the safety card in the pocket in front of him. He thought about the soft pillow waiting under his armrest and the small bag of snacks they would get once the plane took off. He tried to imagine the sky outside yawning wide under them, carrying them smoothly toward Grandma's house. But each time he closed his eyes, he felt the weight of the repeated checks press down on him again. When other flight attendants walked by, he noticed how they greeted passengers with light conversation, offering water or coffee, sometimes asking about travel plans or wish list destinations. None of them asked for extra ID or paused for a second look. He saw Naomi glance at the other flight attendant who had scanned his license. She looked puzzled, as if she could sense that something was not quite right, but did not know what. Marcus leaned toward her and said quietly, "Would you like some juice now?" He hoped the distraction would lift her spirits. She nodded and reached for her favorite juice box in her bag. He smiled at her and poured out a steady stream of calm for both of them. The plane engines rumbled in the background, a gentle promise of motion and distance from here to there. Naomi sipped her juice slowly, humming with satisfaction. Marcus surveyed the cabin once more. The polished wood finish on the seatbacks, the soft glow of the reading lights. The embroidered logo on the headrest sit was all beautiful, almost surreal. He tried to remember the wonder of this surprise and to push away the uneasy feeling that had crept into the morning. He thought of Grandma's laugh, of the story she would tell about how brave and kind Naomi was. He wanted to preserve that bright memory for his daughter, to make sure nothing dimmed it. A moment later, a senior flight attendant approached with a warm smile and a small card. "Mr. Hayes, on behalf of our airline, I want to apologize for." "Any trouble at check-in and security?" she said, handing him the apology card. "Please accept this voucher for a future flight and know that we value you as our guest." Marcus's heart thumped with relief and a flicker of gratitude. He accepted the card with a gentle nod. He felt that, despite the rough patches, the rest of the trip might yet be as smooth and lovely as he had hoped. He folded the card and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He leaned back into his seat and looked at Naomi, who was already engrossed in her book, a tiny smile dancing on her lips. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension ease a little. He reached over and squeezed her hand, feeling the soft warmth of her skin. She looked up and returned his smile. In that moment, Marcus knew he would do anything to protect her joy, to make sure her view of... They walked down the narrow jet bridge together, Marcus holding Naomi's hand so she would not trip on the slight curve of the floor. Around them, the glass walls showed the tarmac and other planes parked under the morning sun. Marcus tried to steady his breath. He told himself this was just part of the trip, but his heart still raced. As they stepped into the first-class cabin, a soft chime rang. The seats were wide, upholstered in cream leather, each with its own blanket and pillow. Overhead bins gleamed, and the carpet looked plush under their feet. Naomi gasped softly, her eyes shining bright. Marcus felt a small smile return to his face. A flight attendant in a crisp uniform greeted them with a bright smile. She held out a small handheld scanner. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Welcome aboard. May I please see your ID again?" Marcus blinked, surprised. He reached into his jacket, pocket and handed over his driver's license. The attendant studied it carefully, her brows knitting together ever so slightly. She scanned the barcode on the license with the scanner, then held it up to read the fine print. Around them, other passengers lounged in their seats, unwrapping pillows or flipping through the safety cards. No one else was asked for ID twice. The attendant turned the license over in her hand, tilting it against the light from the overhead lamp. Naomi watched with quiet concern. Marcus felt a flush creep up his neck. When the attendant finally handed back the license, she gave a small practiced smile. "Thank you, sir. Enjoy your seat." She stepped aside and moved down the aisle without another word. Marcus slipped the license back into his pocket, cleared his throat, and crouched to Naomi's level. "'Kay, sweetie," he said softly. "Let's find your window seat." She let go of his hand and hurried to the row they had chosen earlier. They settled in, Marcus in the aisle, and Naomi at the window. He helped her buckle the seatbelt, careful to make it snug, but gentle. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and peered out the window at the hangars and trucks below. He offered her a juice box from his bag, and she accepted with a grateful smile. He watched her sip as he arranged his own pillows and blanket. He tried to focus on the soft hum of the cabin and the gentle clink of cups as the flight attendant prepared drinks for other passengers. For a moment, he almost felt at ease. But then another flight attendant appeared from the galley, approaching slowly. Marcus straightened up, wondering if she was offering water or coffee. "Duh." Instead, she stopped beside his seat and said quietly, "Sir, I'm sorry, but could I see your ID one more time?" He started, his heart sinking. He reached for his pocket again, pulling out the license, handed it over, his fingers brushing the smooth plastic. She took it and glanced at the photo, then at the printed name, then at the boarding pass he had placed on his tray table. Around them, the atmosphere remained calm, and ordinary other travelers chatting quietly, some already dozing under their blankets. Naomi looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion. She whispered, "Daddy, why do they keep asking?" Marcus swallowed hard. He felt a hollow ache in his chest, as if all the pride he had felt that morning had been chipped away. He patted her hand gently. "They just need to check again," he said, keeping his voice soft. "They want to be sure." Inside, he remembered every time he had faced suspicion because of how he looked in stores, on the street, even once by a neighbor who misunderstood him. He pushed the memories away so he could stay strong for Naomi. The attendant handed back the license without another word. She moved on, her heels clicking on the aisle floor. Marcus placed the license back in his pocket and leaned back against the headrest. He tried to focus on the pattern on the blanket in front of him, the embroidered logo on the pillow, anything that felt safe. Naomi curled up in her seat, looking at her own little snack bag. He could feel her little body tremble with the aftershocks of confusion. He reached over and squeezed her hand, hoping she felt his steady support. Across the aisle, a businessman in a gray suit stretched out, placing his laptop on his seatback tray. He had not been asked for extra ID. In the row ahead, a blonde woman adjusted her scarf without interruption. Marcus watched them and felt the sting of unfairness, how some people slid through life without extra questions. While he stood under the spotlight, he thought of the months he spent saving for this trip, of every hard choice he made so Naomi could have this day. How simple it should have been, how bright and full of joy. The engines roared behind them as other passengers buckled in. Flight attendants began their safety demonstration, their voices calm and clear. Marcus listened to the words about oxygen masks and emergency exits, but his mind raced. He counted how many times he had shown his eye to once at check-in, once at security, now twice in the cabin. He wondered if there would be one more check before takeoff. He felt the weight of each moment, the way each glance from the attendants carried a question he did not want to answer. Naomi turned in her seat, looking at him with honest eyes. "Daddy, will they ask again?" she asked in a small voice. He rested his hand on her shoulder. "I hope not, sweetheart," he said, trying to sound light. "But if they do, we will just be polite." He smiled at her, though it felt forced, and she returned the smile, trusting him completely. He kissed the top of her head and whispered, "You are so brave." She tucked her head back into the seat and nodded. She closed her eyes and let the quiet lull of the cabin wash over her. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the steady beep of the seatbelt sign above them. The plane began to roll forward, and he felt the gentle push against his seat as they moved toward the runway. He held Naomi's hand a little tighter, feeling the warmth of her skin. He looked out the window again and saw the runway lights stretching before them. He thought of the sky beyond, the wide open space they would soon fly into. In that moment, Marcus felt both small and powerful. He was small because the airline's policy made him prove himself again and again. He was powerful because he had the courage to carry his daughter through this, to keep her safe and calm and full of joy. He opened his eyes, watching the ground. Lights blur as the plane picked up speed. Naomi stirred beside him, her small head turning toward him. He smiled at her and she smiled back, her trust unshaken by the extra checks and puzzled looks. As the wheels lifted off the ground, Marcus felt a rush of relief and hope. The repeated ID requests still lingered in his mind, but the sky was wide and welcoming. He closed his eyes again, holding Naomi close, feeling the plane rise into the clouds. He knew there would be hard conversations later, but for now they were soaring free, together above all the questions and the doubts. And in that lift, he found a small peace, feeling the warmth of the sun through the cabin windows and the soft hum of the engines carrying them forward into a brighter day. Marcus tightened his grip on his phone as he stared at the soft glow of the screen. He had tried to keep calm all morning for Naomi's sake, but inside him, a storm was building. He thought back to every time he had shown that driver's license first. At check-in, then at security, then twice inside the cabin. Each time he handed over the small plastic card, felt the eyes of the agent or attendant scanning his face and the name on the pass. Each time, a silent question hung in the air. Why do you not belong here? He looked over at Naomi, who was tucked into her window seat, her small shoulders rising and falling in a quiet breath. She had drifted off to sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. He felt a surge of love and protectiveness. He would not let this day, this rare treat for her, be ruined by the sting of repeated doubt. He pressed the speaker button and waited as the call connected. A gentle voice answered after a brief ring. Thank you for calling Skylines Airlines customer care. My name is Jessica. How can I help you today? Marcus cleared his throat. Hello, Jessica. My name is Marcus Hayes, and I'm on flight 273 to Chicago. I'm sitting in first class with my daughter. He paused, gathering his words. We have had to show our ID 5 times already today. At check-in, at security, and 3 times on the plane. I understand security is important, but this felt wrong. It felt like I was being treated as if I didn't belong here. There was a brief silence. Then Jessica spoke softly. Mr. Hayes, I'm very sorry to hear this. May I have your confirmation number so I can look up your reservation? He gave her the 6-letter code. She typed for a moment. Then she said, I see your booking here. You're traveling with your daughter. Can you tell me more about what happened? Marcus took a deep breath and explained, step by step. He described the polite but firm request at the check-in counter, the puzzled look on the agent's face as she compared his photo to his boarding pass. He told her about the security checkpoint where the officer had scanned his ID 3 times. While ignoring other passengers, he described how, once on the plane, 2 different attendants had asked again. He told her how Naomi had asked him quietly why they kept asking, and how his heart hurt every time he had to reassure her. As he spoke, his voice grew firmer. He was no longer hiding behind polite calm. He was standing up for his dignity and his daughter's joy. I'm here to have a special day with my child, he said. I don't want to spoil it with feelings of shame or confusion. Jessica listened. He could hear her typing, checking notes, perhaps talking to a supervisor. She said, Mr. Hayes, I understand your frustration. I apologize on behalf of Skylines for any distress we have caused. Our policy is to verify IDs, but clearly we should not cause undue worry, especially for families. He answered quietly. Thank you, I appreciate that. But what can you do right now? We have flight time and precious minutes with the people waiting for us. I don't want to have this happen again. There was another pause. Then Jessica said, here's what I can offer. I will notify the in-flight team immediately with a special instruction on your reservation. They will have a note on their manifest that you have been verified. They will accept your ID once, and then no more. Additionally, I can offer you a voucher for a future flight, and we will make sure to make today smoother. Will that help? Marcus felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders. He thought of Naomi sleeping peacefully. He thought of the tears he had held back when she looked at him with uncertainty. He wanted this moment to be a triumph, not a lesson in awkward bias.
He nodded.
Even though Jessica could not see him. Yes, he said. Please do that. And I would like to take you up on the voucher, if that is possible. Absolutely, Jessica said. I will send a digital voucher to the email on file by the time you land. You can use it for any one-way or round-trip flight within the next year. And I've just sent a note to the cabin crew. You have my word they will not ask again. That means a lot, Marcus said. Thank you. I'm glad I could help, she said warmly. Enjoy the rest of your flight. And give my regards to your daughter when she wakes. Smiled and ended the call. The phone slipped from his grasp and landed softly in his lap. He leaned back in his seat and let out a breath he had been holding. He looked at Naomi, still asleep. He reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Her lashes fluttered once, and she murmured in her sleep, then settled again. He smiled at the quiet rhythm of her breathing and felt a surge of gratitude. She was safe. She was happy. Today, they would still have the memory he had promised. The flight attendant passed by with a tray of refreshments, and Marcus caught her eye. She offered him a warm smile. Mr. Hayes, she said, I've received a note that your ID is now cleared. You won't need to show it again today. My apologies for the trouble earlier. He nodded and smiled back, thanking her. She moved down the aisle, and Marcus felt a warm glow in his chest. The tension that had knotted his shoulders loosened into relief. He reached for the small packet of snacks he had stashed in his jacket pocket. When he opened it, he found a small handwritten apology card from the in-flight manager. The neat script said, Thank you for your patience. We value your business. Enjoy the rest of your journey. Please accept this voucher for the inconvenience. He tucked the card into his wallet, feeling that it was more than just an apology, was an acknowledgement that he mattered as a customer and as a person. He opened the overhead compartment and took down the soft blanket. He placed it gently over Naomi, covering her little shoulders. He adjusted the pillow under her head and brushed her cheek with a father's gentle hand. Once she was comfortable, he leaned forward and adjusted his own seat to recline slightly. He peered out of the window where the world below had given way to a blanket of clouds. The sun shone through with a soft glow, as if blessing their journey. Marcus closed his eyes briefly and replayed the morning in his mind. He remembered his daughter's gasp of wonder at the first-class cabin, her laughter as the plane rumbled down the runway, and her quiet questions when the checks felt unfair. He remembered the look on the agents' and attendants' faces, the polite smiles that held a tinge of doubt. Now, after one phone call and a simple promise from the airline, it felt different. He felt seen, he felt respected, and he felt proud that he had spoken up, not out of anger, but out of love for his child. He thought of the story he would tell later, perhaps in a calm Facebook post, where he would share their positive moments, but also the lesson of being heard. He wanted people to know that polite words could change a situation, that one voice could open ears and hearts. He thought of the future travel voucher. Maybe he would take Naomi on another surprise. She was turning 11 soon, and he already had ideas in mind. Lost in these thoughts, he felt a light tap on his shoulder. He turned to see the senior flight attendant again, this time with a small tray. On it were 2 glasses of orange juice and a plate of warm cookies. She set it down and said, "Compliments of Skylines, sir. Please enjoy." Marcus looked between the treats in the attendant's kind eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm. "This means a lot." She nodded and moved on. He poured the juice for him and Naomi, careful not to spill, then set one glass beside his daughter's seat. Her eyes fluttered open at the gentle clink. She sat up and smiled sleepily. Her eyes widened as she took in the tray. "Wow, Daddy," she said quietly. "Cookies." He laughed softly. "Yes, cookies." She reached out and took one, then offered the glass to him. "Orange juice," she said, and he chuckled as he sipped. They ate together in a soft silence, the kind that felt easy and good. He told her stories about when he was her age, about flights he had taken with his own parents, about the time he got lost at the airport and found his way back by holding his dad's hand. She giggled and reached for another cookie. He watched the sweet crumbs fall on her lap and remembered the long nights spent saving for this surprise. As they neared their destination, the captain's voice came over the intercom, clear and calm. He welcomed everyone, thanked them for flying Skylines, airlines, and said they would begin their descent shortly. Marcus felt a flutter of anticipation. He wondered how Naomi would feel when she saw her grandmother waiting. He thought of her warm arms and welcoming smile. He thought of how proud Naomi would be to tell her that they had flown first classes, especially when her dad had stood up. For them both, the plane began its gentle drop through the clouds. Marcus placed his hand on Naomi's shoulder. She leaned into him and whispered, "Thank you, Daddy, for the cookies and for today." He smiled and kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for being my brave girl," he said. "I'm proud of you." She smiled back up at him, sleep soft and happy. He felt the last of his worry dissolve into the hum of the engines and the glow of the sunrise through the window. When the wheels touched down, he would carry her off the plane and into Grandma's open arms. He would carry this moment too, the moment he spoke up, stood tall, made sure that both he and his daughter felt respected and safe, and he knew that this trip would be one they talked about for years to come, the day they flew first class. The day he proved that a single phone call and a clear voice could change everything. Marcus felt the gentle bump of the wheels as the plane touched down on the runway. A soft cheer rippled through the cabin. He glanced at Naomi, who sat wide-eyed, her small hand gripping his. She wore a bright smile that lit up her face. He returned her smile, proud of how brave she had been through the repeated ID checks and the surprise of first class. He gave her hand a squeeze and she leaned close. "We made it, Daddy," she whispered. He felt a rush of relief wash over him. The tension in his shoulders eased, replaced by warmth and gratitude. Around them, passengers began unbuckling their seatbelts and gathering their belongings. Flight attendants moved through the aisle, collecting trays and helping travelers stand up. A few glanced their way and offered small nods of recognition. Marcus and Naomi waited patiently until the seatbelt sign clicked off, stood and lifted Naomi gently out of her seat. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her cheek against his shoulder. He held her for a moment, inhaling the soft scent of her hair, marveling at how much she had grown. They stepped into the jet bridge, and the bright airport terminal stretched before them. The air felt cooler here, and the sound of rolling luggage wheels and distant announcements echoed around them. Marcus carried Naomi's backpack on one shoulder and held her hand with his free hand. She hopped beside him, pointing excitedly at the arrival board and the long hallway ahead. "I can't wait to see Grandma," she said, her eyes shining. They walked together through the terminal, weaving past other passengers. Every time Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, he felt a flutter of curiosity. He pulled it out and saw notifications from the Skylines app, confirming the voucher and the apology note. He smiled and pocketed the phone again. He wanted to share this later, but right now his focus was on the moment ahead. At the gate, a crowd had gathered. Marcus spotted his mother, standing near the barrier. She wore a bright floral dress and held a large sign that read, "Welcome, Naomi." Her hair was gray at the temples, soft and wavy. She waved enthusiastically, and Marcus saw tears of joy in her eyes. Naomi let go of his hand and ran toward her grandmother. Marcus followed, carrying her backpack and her small stuffed rabbit. When Naomi reached her grandmother, she threw her arms around her in a tight hug. Grandma dropped the sign and wrapped Naomi in her own arms, rocking her gently. "Oh, my sweet girl, I missed you so much," she said, her voice full of love. Naomi giggled and pointed up at Marcus. "And Daddy saved the best seat for me," she said proudly. Marcus smiled at the two of them, his heart full. His mother looked at him with pride, too. "Thank you for bringing her safely," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from Naomi's face. "And for this wonderful surprise." He nodded. "I wanted her to feel special," he said. "She deserved it." They exited the terminal and stepped onto the curb where a small taxi waited. Grandma opened the trunk and placed Naomi's backpack inside. Marcus held the door open for them. As Naomi settled into the back seat, she waved at him, leaned in and whispered, "I love you, Pumpkin." She waved and said, "I love you too, Daddy." He closed the door and joined his mother in the front seat. The taxi pulled away, gliding through the airport driveway toward the parking lot where he would retrieve their car later. As the taxi disappeared around the corner, Marcus stood on the sidewalk, watching them go. A gentle breeze picked up, rustling the leaves on the nearby trees. He thought of the morning's events, the excitement of the surprise, the repeated requests for ID the moment he made that call, and the relief when things got better. He realized that every moment had shaped this day into something more than just a trip. It had become a lesson in dignity, a story of standing up calmly for what was right. He glanced down at his phone and opened the social media app he used. He typed a short message about the morning, how he and Naomi had flown first class, how they faced repeated ID checks, and how he called customer care to set things right. He wrote about the kindness of the staff who apologized and offered a voucher, and about how proud he was of his daughter's courage. He ended the post with a simple thought: a voice can make a difference when used with calm and respect. He hit post and watched the message go out into the world. Within minutes, his phone buzzed again. Likes and comments began to appear. People praised his calm approach. Some shared similar stories of small injustices they had faced. Others thanked him for reminding them that speaking up could change things. He read the comments with a quiet smile, felt a sense of connection. With strangers who understood, he realized his story had become more than just a personal memory. It had become a small spark in a larger conversation about fairness and respect. After he put away his phone, he noticed a shining yellow taxi turning toward him. He walked back to the curb, where the driver rolled down the window.
"Mr. Hayes?"
the driver asked. Marcus nodded and opened the back door. He placed his daughter's backpack gently inside, then climbed in beside his mother. The driver pulled out into traffic, and the city skyline shimmered ahead through the morning haze. Inside the taxi, Grandma hummed a soft tune, and Naomi leaned, her head against Marcus's shoulder. He rested his arm around her, and she curled up comfortably. He looked out the window at the busy streets, the early commuters, the tall buildings casting long shadows. He felt a deep sense of gratitude that he could share this day with his daughter and his mother. He thought of the future adventures they might have, more flights, more memories, more stories to tell. As the taxi made its way toward Grandma's house, Marcus closed his eyes for a moment and let the quiet settle over him. He thought of the power of a single phone call, of the calm words that had turned a tense moment into an apology and a promise. He thought of the importance of teaching Naomi to stand up respectfully for herself and for others. He thought of her smiles and her questions, and of how strong she already was at 10 years old. When they arrived at Grandma's house, the taxi pulled up in front of a small cottage with a white picket fence and a garden full of blooming flowers. Grandma opened the gate and led Naomi through to the front porch. Marcus followed with her backpack. He watched as Naomi climbed the steps 2 at a time and rang the doorbell. The door opened, and inside, he could smell the scent of fresh baking Grandma's famous apple pie. Come in, Grandma called. Make yourselves at home." Marcus set the backpack down and stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and looked around at the warm, cozy living room. Photographs of family lined the walls, pictures of Naomi as a baby, of Marcus with his parents, of birthdays and celebrations. He smiled at the memories captured in each frame. As he stood there, he thought of the journey they had shared today. He thought of the smile on Naomi's face when she first saw those wide, first-class seats. He thought of the fear in her eyes when they were asked for ID again and again. He thought of the pride he felt when he made that call and set things right. He thought of how his daughter now hugged her grandmother, safe and happy. He realized that this trip had been about more than just seeing Grandma. It had been about teaching Naomi that she mattered, that her feelings mattered, and that calm words could change hearts. It had been about showing her that she belonged, no matter how many times someone doubted her. and that lesson would stay with her forever. He took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the house and the love in the room. He walked over to the kitchen where the pie rested on the counter, steam rising in gentle spirals. He cut 2 slices and carried one to Naomi, who sat at the table with her grandmother. Marcus poured them each a glass of milk. They tasted the sweet cinnamon-rich pie together, and Naomi's eyes closed in delight. As they ate, Grandma told stories of when she was young, of her own travels and adventures. Naomi giggled and asked questions. Marcus listened, feeling content. He knew this day would become a cherished memory for all of them. And when they finally left that cozy house, they would carry with them the story of how a single dad and his brave daughter turned a stressful situation into a lesson in respect and courage. That night, as Marcus tucked Naomi into Grandma's spare bed, she whispered, "Thank you for today, Daddy. It was the best day ever." He kissed her forehead and whispered back, "You're welcome, Pumpkin. You made it the best." He turned off the light and closed the door softly. As he walked down the hallway, he thought of the post he had written and the people who had read it. He felt proud that their story had touched others. Outside, the moon shone over the quiet neighborhood. Inside, the house was full of warmth and love. Marcus realized that even small actions like one calm phone call could shine like a beacon. And with that thought, he knew that his daughter's heart would always have room for courage, kindness, and the quiet strength to speak up when it mattered most.